So without further ado, let's get started. So why is mobile device management important then? As you can see, Stuart McLaughlan, technical consultant working under the end user computing space. I do regularly post on the PowerON platform's website under news and blogs, so please do feel free to follow us and see what we're doing. We do like to do a lot of dev work with the mobile device management space, so you can check what we're doing on there. So what are we going to be covering today then? Well, introductory to mobile device management. What is it? Why we need it? And why, with the recent changes that are up and coming, why it's growing ever so important. The benefits. So what does MDM actually give us? How do we use it? What sort of things can we harness from it? GDP, regulations, MAM, and mobile statistics. No idea why that just did that, but as you can see, yeah, introduction, benefits, mobile statistics, GDP, and MAM. So let's crack on. Oh, conditional access to, and a demo. So what is mobile device management then? So, most of you will know it's a platform used to secure corporate and personal mobile devices while accessing corporate resources. So I guess over the last, this is only just starting to come to light. So, you as a business may have been using, the likes of Exchange to put mailbox policies, but with the ever growing mobile device space, with viruses and stuff, it's becoming ever so important. So, whilst the Exchange system itself gave you minimal sort of control over a user's phone, it was quite clear that that wasn't really quite enough. So a mobile device management platform purely is a system that can be used to manage mobile devices, push down policies, and almost sort of the way that I like to see it is not just putting control on a user's device, but actually helping them to work. So we'll come across it, we'll speak about it in a little bit, but some of the things that we can do is we can start to provision devices, so give the users their enterprise their line of business apps that they'll require for their job. So straight out the box, they'll enroll, they'll have their applications that they need to do their job. So it's an over-the-air management solution. So what we typically mean by that is it's over an internet connection. So these devices don't have to be domain joined. As long as they physically have an internet connection, then we can talk to them, we can control them. And there is an administrator console. So for you guys that may have had experience with mobile device management platforms before, the likes of AirWatch, PowerON is very much their cloud implementation. So you'll log onto a web portal and you can start to make changes. With the likes of Intune, which is the solution that we recommend, there's two options. So we can have a cloud implementation. So very much, an administrator can log on, make some changes to the policy, start checking out how the devices are getting on, or we have an on-premise implementation with Intune, also known as Intune Hybrid. So that is linked with SCCM, which I guess in my opinion is my preferred method. I'd love to hear if you guys have used Intune, some of your experiences, and if you've used SCCM and any issues, but we can leave them questions to the end. So yeah, overall that's what it is. Management of mobile devices to secure them at the front door. So I touched upon benefits a little bit earlier, but deployment of work-related apps. So a user receives their work phone. What we can do is we can make sure, if they're out on the road, they're in sales, we can make sure that when that device is enrolled, it has the likes of Concur on it. So they can do their expenses. Now, all that physically takes is for me to enroll my device. When that device is enrolled, it will pull down all them applications. So, not only are we enforcing control on a mobile device, we're also making it easier for a user to actually get up and running and actually working, and give them all the tools they need to do their job. So, that ties in with a bit of, smart provisioning. once enrollment, we're not just locking down that device, we are giving them the tools that they require. So also with an MDM solution, we can start to push down software updates. So the latest iOS updates which may be required for a device, because as I'm sure you're all aware, the frequent updates that come from the likes of Apple will include bug fixes, but also security fixes as well for any threats that have gone out. So it's important for us to be able to manage them and make sure that not only our devices are getting them, but they're getting them at a time that's not going to affect the user. The enrollment itself is pretty painless. So for Intune, depending on the platform, there are a couple of ways of enrollment. So iOS is just an application that you download called the company portal. So that can be downloaded from the store. Windows enrollment is native. So if you do have a Windows phone, you'll find within settings that you have workplace join. So what the user would do, they would type in their on-premise password and their email address, and then obviously from there, the wizard will walk them through how to physically get enrolled. So it's quite a nice approach. There is some third-party solutions. Well, I say solutions. So Apple do a very, very nice out-of-the-box enrollment wizard as well, which is called the Deployment Enrollment Program, which allows you to essentially take a phone, send that off to the user's house straight from the carrier and straight out the box. What is your username? What is your password? Once they're putting that in, the device is configured. So as I'm sure you can appreciate, that doesn't put a burden on your IT department having to set up all these devices for their end users, having to bring them into the office, set them up, and then send them on their way. And I guess the biggest benefit making our way down is flexible working. So as I'm sure you can appreciate, we've given them access to corporate resources, which is ultimately why we do enable our users to have company phones, to access the likes of SharePoint, access the likes of SharePoint, OneDrive, and everything like that. So I'm just going to move on from benefits then. So always with these mobile device management sort of talks, it's always useful to pull in some sort of statistics. And to be honest with you, here's some quite scary ones. So as you can see here, I have some statistics which I've pulled from various sources. Now, this just, I guess, really highlights the need for mobile device management. So I'm going to pick out one of my favorites. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not a massive fan on Android devices, so I'm going to pick on Android. So believe it or not, this is a true figure. So 1 in 5 Android users experienced a mobile threat in 2014. So that's a really, really big number. So that just really puts into perspective how likely it is for a device to physically get a threat. And if there is no protection, you could be subject to some fairly hefty fines, which is what we're about to come on to. But it just highlights how at risk our mobile devices are. And with them having access to corporate resources, I don't know about you guys, but it's very, very important that we are securing these to make sure that our data is protected, because ultimately I guess that's the main thing for us, right, is to make sure that whilst we're being flexible, that our users can work and they can be flexible and they can access the data 24/7, that there is a level of control to make sure that if there is a threat, that it can be stopped in its tracks. So it's quite a big statistic there. There's some other ones as well. So 262% increase in the number of iOS vulnerabilities compared to 2011. So quite an interesting figure, because with iOS and Apple, it's a common misconception that they cannot get viruses and such, which, as you can see, it's very possible. Between the two platforms, you're more likely to obviously to pick up a virus from the likes of Android, due to the fact that the actual app stores don't get vetted. But iOS, there was a threat that was well publicized, which was the Pegasus threat. So it just shows that even with the secure platforms that which we, or the platforms that we think are secure, they are still susceptible. Um, yes. So I'm sure most of you on the call know about GDPR, which is coming in. So very, very scary, I guess, especially with your mobile devices out there. This is why the likes of mobile device management, if you're not looking at it or you haven't been looking at it, why you really should start looking at it. So a bit about that then. So if for example there is data leakage, so if we end up leaking customers' data out onto the internet, whilst historically, the press may have picked up on it and, there would be some company damage, you now can be fined. So how does that really look? So in the first cases, it's very much a written warning. Now, I say this, it's very much depends on the type of leak. But if it's minimal, then, we're talking very much about a warning in the first instance. And, hopefully, if you haven't picked up an MDM solution at that point, might really start to prompt you to. So there will be regular periodic data protection audits. And the scary pieces here is that depending on the type of leak, a company can be fined up to 10 million euros of their 10% annual worldwide turnover. So I'm sure most of you already know about this, but for me, that's a huge amount of money, which, if I can do something to protect that with, a solution which will lock down my devices, then, it's certainly worth doing. And in more severe cases, that can be up to 20 million euros or up to 4% of the annual worldwide turnover. So that's GDPR. So before the call today, I was reading through some of the comments that people were looking to get at this session, and I know there was a lot around the mobile application management space. So what I'm actually going to do today in my demo, which is coming up, I'm going to talk not just about MAM but also MAM without enrollment, and we'll explain why you may use one and why you may use the other, and conditional access. So mobile application management then. It works with iOS and Android. So what we can essentially do is we can place a wrapper around the actual application, which allows us to put policies direct on the application itself. So sort of the policies we can, or the sort of the features that we can harness is, we can prevent screen drop, copy and paste between, we can say, well, okay, Outlook, for example, can talk to Word, but because the likes of maybe Adobe, for example, because that's not a managed app, you cannot take data take data out of Word and put it into the like of Adobe. So not only is it just one way, we can say what can go into the application and what can come out. So it's a really, really nice piece. For those out there who do already have mobile device management solution and publish their own line of business apps, you can actually make your own MAM enabled apps. So if you have gone down the Intune route, you can find out on the internet the Intune MAM SDK. So you can actually start to control your own applications as well. So as I said earlier, we've got two different types of enrollment. We have MAM without enrollment. So what, I guess, how do I explain this to you guys? So it's mobile application management without the need for enrollment. So the way that this essentially works is when I go to access my corporate data, I do not have to be enrolled in mobile device management. Now, the great benefit of this is more around the BYOD estate, because I'll talk about the two scenarios. So I have a corporate estate and I have a personal estate. So A good example I like to use is the Outlook app. So as a business, that's a MAM-enabled app. So we want to be able to control that. So we want to say, I don't want you to be able to copy data from the application and paste elsewhere. Now, when it comes to the likes of bring your own device, that becomes enrollment works on the application layer. So when you have a bring your own device and you apply that, we may find that one of your users, they actively use the Outlook application as opposed to the native client, and that's what they prefer. So when we start to put policies such as that around on the bring your own device environment, because the policies are placed on the application layer, if the users actually have their own mail in this mailbox or within this application, we're actually preventing them from manipulating the data in their personal mailbox, which they would normally do so. Now, for me, it should have that flexibility. So we should be able to say, okay, if I want to take my corporate data out, you can't do that. But if it's your personal data, do you know what? That's not a problem for us, as long as you are not taking the personal data out. So MAM with enrollment is because, as I say, we can prevent them from adding their own personal mailboxes, or you can have the approach of, okay, fine, you can add your own personal mailbox, but you will be subject to these rules. Now, MAM without enrollment, as I say, is a little bit different because it works on the identity level. So we'll see this in a little bit. I'm happy to give you guys a demo, but you will see that I can have a personal mailbox in the Outlook application, which is a MAM-enabled app, and a corporate mailbox, so personal and corporate. Now I can take the corporate, I can take the personal data out, not a problem. I cannot paste the corporate data out. So whilst they are one app, the protection is placed around the identity level. Moving on then, conditional access. So this is a really big thing for me because we go in and we visit a lot of companies who have implemented Intune previously. They've secured their mobile estate, but I guess the best way to explain it, we've spent hundreds of pounds, maybe hundreds of thousands, creating an MDM solution. But what stops me from picking up my personal phone if I know my mail credentials? I know what my mail server is, I know what my username is, and I know what my password is, and accessing my mail. Well, at the moment, without conditional access, nothing. So that is a way, without conditional access, you can simply just circumvent the MDM solution whatsoever. Now, we have seen a lot of companies that actually have done this. So for me, it's a very, very important piece of the mobile device management solution. So as you can see, used to prevent access to corporate resources by assessment against 4 measures. So location. So the location piece is more around the Azure side. So when we want to access cloud-based apps, if we are on if we are coming from an IP which is trusted, and that's one of our internal IP addresses, then we can allow access to the app. Now, if we are off the network, we're prevented access. Device, which is more around the Intune side, so conditional access. Is the device enrolled in Intune? Does it meet any compliance policies? If it doesn't, what happens is they are blocked access until they're remediated. Any policies that are applied to the user or the application, and then a risk score. So in the later versions of Intune, you may have noticed an announcement with Microsoft with a company called Lookout. So Lookout is about threat detection and threat remediation. So, potentially when we have a threat, we give it a risk score. So would happen is that would then poll Intune, and with a risk score and with the likes of Intune, and when we set up conditional access, we can say, okay, if a device comes in with a high risk score, we deny access. So probably the moment you've all been waiting for. So let's actually show you how this works. So what I've got here, I have our config manager estate. I'm actually just going to pull up a test phone that I have as well, just so you guys can actually see the end user experience. Bear with me one moment. So as you can see, this is actually my phone. So this is all live, what I'm doing here. So what we should be able to see is as we make changes and as we start to look through things, we can actually see the end user experience. So pretty, as I say, it's pretty simple. So we spoke earlier about enrollment. So I'm just going to dive into the iOS App Store. As you can see, pretty simple. We jump in here and we grab the Intune company portal. So I already have it on my device. So let's click open. So I go ahead and type my credentials in. In the interest of security, I am just going to quickly drop this off, practice what I preach. Bear with me 2 seconds while I just type my password. That's not come off. There we go. Okay, let's pull that back up so you guys can see. Okay, so the end user experience on an iPhone will look similar to this. So it will give the user a wizard. You know, if you are taking the approach that you want to allow your users, you want to send out some instructions to actually get enrolled. It's quite intuitive. So you can see here, why are we doing this? You know, device enrollment. Enrollment lets your company manage your device and give you access to company resources. So the main, you know, if you're emphasizing to users why we're doing this, you know, more around giving them access to their company resources. But obviously with that, we need to layer some control. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to enroll. As you can see, it talks through the user how we're going to do this, what's actually happening. So it's just going away to Intune now, and it's just going to enroll the device, and you can see here the management profile has popped up, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to install this. So, you know, to make sure that it's me, it's going to prompt me for my password. I'm not too worried about you guys seeing my my handheld password. Yep, so just a brief warning about what it's going to do. Let's go ahead, let's trust that, and let's install that. Okay, so my device is enrolled. So the first thing it's going to do now is it's going to look for all the policies which are applied to me. So in terms of actual physical lockdown of policies as such, we haven't done many just for this demo, but I'm quite happy to actually show you how we set up policies and you know, what type of policies we can do. But one of the interesting things is here. So you'll see that my device is now starting to look, it's checking its compliance and it's looking in for, you know, any applications which may be required. So in a second we should start to see some pop-ups. Just while that makes its way through. Oh. Okay, so you can see now it's popped up and it's asked me for my Exchange profile. So one of the things that we can do with mobile device management is make the user's life easier. So rather than them having to know what the mail credentials are, we'll push, the mail details, we can push that out to them. All they need is just their password, and then they can get access to their emails. So what we can do on iOS is obviously we can see what we've actually pushed out. So you can see here, I've pushed out Wi-Fi profiles. So when I go to our different offices in PowerON platforms, my device will automatically connect. I don't have to connect to the Wi-Fi and type in the details. So that's all come from the mobile device management solution. So making our way down, a SCEP profile. So very much about what my device has actually done is it's contacted our internal network and it's requested a device, a user certificate for the phone. So this can start to be used with the likes of VPN and the likes of ADFS with certificate authentication. And we can also see that it's pulled down some of our root certificates. You can also see that there are 8 managed apps as well. Now, I'm just going to quickly jump back to that. We can see the applications that I've actually pushed out as a business. So Skype for Business, Lookout for Work, Lookout Work, Word, Concur. Now, I'll just show you this experience. If I uninstall one of these and I check compliance, I don't know how quickly this is going to do this. But what we should see when it checks is it should actually notice that application is missing, and it will push it down. Because what we have when we push out applications, we have 2 types of deployments. We have an available deployment or a required. So if the application accidentally does get removed, it will put itself back on. So while we continue the rest of the demo, I'm just going to, oh, there we go, actually, it's just done it. So as you can see now, my device is checked in, it knows that I'm missing an application, and it's just put it back on. So you can see how this would really benefit the users. They've enrolled, they need all these applications for their job, we can simply push them out when they enroll. So it's a really nice streamlined process to get users up and working and connected to their corporate resources with minimal effort. So that's obviously just making its way through there. Now, so once that's obviously done with the mobile device management solution, we can start to interact with the device. So if I go ahead and I find my device, you can see here my device is listed here. So I can start to interact with it in certain ways. So for example, a common thing with mobile device management, which is an absolute godsend, users forgetting what their handheld pin is. What we can do from a mobile device management solution, we can reset their passcode. We can send that out, so if they do forget it, we can gain access to the phone. Now, this also is quite handy for cases where a user has left. Maybe it's a dismissal. We need to get access to that device, so we can physically gain access by resetting the passcode and giving us access. There's a few other options as well, so we can view the passcode once we've reset it, and we can send remote locks to that device. So in the event that one of our users calls up and says, hey, I think I may have lost my device, not too sure, we can just send a lock to that device in the first instance. So there is a level of reporting that we can get. So within Config Manager, which is the solution that we're using, we can go into Resource Explorer, so we can start to gain an understanding of what we've actually physically got. So as you can see here, there's some nice information about this device. I won't physically read them out, but as you can see, so we've got the last 4 digits to the phone number, the IMEI. So this is great for making sure that you're tracking what are your company assets. So not only will it manage your device, but it also help for a reporting side to make sure that all of your corporate devices are up to date with all your documentation. So you can see it's also picked up that device is not jailbroken. Got a level of inventory on the installed applications, so we can see what I actually physically have installed. Now, you may be thinking, what about a personal BYOD device. So I can tell you now, if you do have a BYOD device, when it enrolls, we can choose the option to have this as a personal device or a corporate device. If the device is registered as personal, we do not see that inventory about what they have installed. So there is still a level of secrecy or privacy, would probably be the better word, for your end users. So we're not managing everything. You need to be able to make sure that we're managing our data securely. So I'm just going to skim through these. Also, what's changed on the device? So, you know, from the last time it checked in, what's different? Which is quite a nice way to check between, you know, what's happened between a time frame. Now, what we can do, obviously, you see that I've managed to push out the likes of a mail profile. So it's very, very, very easy to actually get this set up. So if we go to company resource access, which is down here on the left, we have a few options. So email profiles then. So as you can see here, we click create Exchange Active Sync profile. What we can do for our end users is obviously we can give it a name. Our Exchange Active Sync host, so the server that they are connecting to, the name that we want it to appear on the device, so say for example PowerON Platforms Corporate, what their username will be. So in most instances it will actually be primary SMTP. The authentication method, so if you are using certificates, you know, rather than re-prompt the user for their username and password, you can secure it with a certificate, so to make the enrollment process as nice and as slick as possible. So I'm just going to go ahead and type some details in there. And I'm going to click next. So then, as you can see here, we can start to customize. We can say, do you know what, we don't mind when the mail profiles are, when the devices are going and receiving emails, or we can actually set the times for them. Now, that's not to say that you can't do multiple policies. So one of the great things with an MDM solution is that the policies are targeted to the users. So you know that doesn't stop you doing maybe a manager's policy or an end user or a sales or marketing policy. It's the beauty of this solution. And as you can see here, the types of content that we want to synchronize. So contacts, calendar, task, notes. So once we're happy with that, what we can then do is we can start to say, well, okay, great, I'm going to push this out and I'm going to push this out to the user. But what platforms should this work on? So me as a user, I can push a policy out. But if I have, for example, if I tick iPhone and iPad, you know, this policy will only apply to that device. For the likes of Windows 10, if I hadn't ticked that, if I then go and enroll my device, it won't pull down the management policy. So once we're happy with that, we have our email profile. It literally is just a case of deploying that policy to the group of users. So conscious that I haven't actually shown you that, so let me just quickly explain a bit more about that. So when we create policies, what we do is we create a group. So within Config Manager, we call it a collection. So you can see here, if we go to Intune, we have collections of our users. So you know, if I dive in here, we can start to see information about who we have enrolled, who are our targeted users. What we do once we physically once we've set up our collection is, you know, for the email profile, it literally is as simple as just deploying that to that collection. So for example, if I go to collection and click browse, choose the container that it's in, and then I choose my collection. So when that user enrolls, Intune will know that there is this policy which is physically targeted to them, and they will receive the config which I've pushed down. So in terms of creating policies or pushing out company resource, it's quite simple. So policies, still relatively easy. So the general rule of thumb within Config Manager is we create what's called a configuration item. we wrap it in a baseline, which is almost just a wrapper for the policy. So we can have one configuration item in a baseline, or we can have multiple configuration items in a baseline. So we click test, we type test, so we begin to create a policy. You can see here we have the option to choose what type of settings it's going to show us in regards to, so the best way to explain this, if we're looking at iOS devices, we don't want it to show us available settings for Windows. So it's smart enough, if we say we want iOS, we only want iOS settings to come back. Now, you may notice across the top that we have settings for devices with the config manager client. This is purely for desktop. So for those of you that already have configuration manager, you know that it's very much an on-premise installation. It's very much used for management of your estate, so patches, operating system deployment. So for the devices that are domain joined, the options that obviously we choose here, but for mobile device management, it's the second options. So I'm going to go ahead, seeing as I have an iOS phone, I'm going to tick that. So once again, just like company resource, we have the types of devices, so we can say, well, we want this just to apply to iPhone, or we want this to apply to iPhone, iPad, and Mac OS. So click next. As you can see here, we have categories of the types of settings that we want. So if this is your first time that you're looking at configuration manager and mobile device management, it's always useful to just select all, so you can start to understand what we can control on a device. So some of the things then: require password settings, minimum password length, password expiration in days, number of passwords remembered, number of failed logon attempts before device is wiped. So, taking the BlackBerry approach, we can say after 10 failed logins, we'll wipe that device. But there are some nice features. How long after that device hasn't been touched will it lock itself? Number of complex characters, fingerprint for unlocking. So, if you are looking to enforce a 6-digit password with a special character, this is very, very handy for your users if they do have the latest iPhones, so they can unlock their device using some of the other features. Then, we can turn off the likes of Siri, turn off screen capture for the actual device. So bearing in mind what we said earlier was with MAM, we can do it on an application level, but what we can do here is we can do it on a pure device level, so everything cannot be screenshotted. Now, I'm not going to read out all of these. I'm just going to scroll down slowly so you can just take a moment to just see what sort of features we can control with a mobile device management solution. So one also key point to make is when you look at these policies, you will find that all mobile device management solutions all really offer the same sort of settings. Be it they may have a different skin, a different wrapper, and a different way of doing things. So the reason for this is that the likes of Microsoft, so the likes of Intune and AirWatch, they don't actually write the code for the mobile device management solution. It's actually written into the operating system. So you'll find that the likes of turning off Game Center, that will be in AirWatch, that will be in Mobile Lion. It's very much what they choose to write. So Apple will write that we can turn off Apple News from a mobile device management point of view. It's then up to the likes of Intune if they want to put that feature in. So just making our way through them. So cloud backup was a really, really good one as well. So, we don't want the users to be able to back up our corporate data, because obviously bearing in mind MAM applications are quite clever, but what's to say that we haven't been able to, we're using the native client on the iOS device. So the native client on the iOS device is not a MAM enabled app, which means we can't layer as much control as we can around a MAM app. So what necessarily stops me pulling an attachment and saving it locally on my device? Well, if we're using the likes of iCloud, that data could be stored in the cloud. So it's very, some of these features here are very, very, very important. So you'll typically find the likes of your data roaming will be set at a SIM level, but from a mobile device management point, we also can configure them here. Okay. But as I say, these different settings really depend on the operating system that you are targeting. So what's nice with the likes of iOS, so I'm just going to skip past this stage and I'm going to go to iOS and Mac OS. If you find that there is something that Intune, a feature or a setting which doesn't appear because the guys over at Microsoft haven't implemented it, we can load in a policy from Apple Configurator, which is very much a companion tool to mobile device management. So we can send them settings out to the mobile device. We can load in the policy and we can push them settings. So once we've done our settings then, what we do is we create a configuration baseline. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Let's call it test. And we choose our configuration item. So once we've done that, we click OK. I'm not actually going to deploy this, but you can see here the collection, so the user collection or the device collection, because we can do it on both. We can say that a device, so a group of devices or a group of users. We choose our collection, and then we click OK. So one of the important things, if you are looking to go down the hybrid route with Config Manager, this option here is very, very, very important. So if you do not tick this, what actually happens is the System Center will report back that the device is not compliant, so it doesn't meet the settings, but it doesn't actually do anything about them. So this setting will actually says if you find any rules that do not match what we've pushed out, actually make a change to them and remediate them. A policy set out, it's that simple. So as you can see, it doesn't take a lot to get up and work with the likes of a mobile device management solution. So I'm just going to jump back to my phone then. One thing I did forget to mention. So in terms of obviously the mobile device management functionality, when we have that device, a very key thing for customers is the ability to physically wipe that device. So if I find my device, for example, what we can do on that device, if that device is lost, I can actually retire and wipe it. Now I'm actually going to click this because we've got two options. So we can wipe the company content and retire it from the mobile device from Config Manager. So this is very much what's known as a selective wipe. So it will be unenrolled, but we won't wipe the device completely clean. So this sort of wipe is perfect for BYOD environments where you just want to take your corporate data off, but you don't want to wipe the whole device. See, this option here is a complete factory reset. So unfortunately I can't demo conditional access today, but we'll talk, I do want to talk about it with you guys. So as we were talking about earlier, the way that conditional access works out of the box when you're accessing your resources. So for example, if I was to take my personal phone here and I was to, this is a complete personal phone. It's not registered in any MDM solution. If I was to then go to my mail, as if I would do on a personal phone, and say, okay, I want to add a new mail account. Now, if I type them details in without the likes of conditional access, I'd be given access to my mail. Now, conditional access, the way that this works with mobile device management out the box, is very much, is that device registered in Intune? So this is the first thing it checks. So if my device is registered in Intune and I'm accessing my mail, and I try to attempt to access my mail, we'll give the device access. If it's not, what actually happens is that it semi-adds the mailbox. They get an email in their mailbox, which actually gives them an actual email and instructions on actually how to get themselves enrolled. So if it is a legitimate user that doesn't know that there is a mobile device management solution in place, they try to access their email. It's quite nice that straight out from conditional access, whilst they are blocked, we can tell it how to remediate themselves. So if the user then goes ahead and they do enroll themselves, what will happen the next time that device tries to receive email? The device would then be marked as compliant, so it would check in and it would be given access to email. So we have, I'm just going to dive into this just so I can show you some of the functions. So you see here that we've got Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Skype for Business. Now, the reason why Exchange on-premise doesn't appear in here is because it's done natively through the SCCM console. So this is just the online conditional access pieces. So to get this turned on, what we would need, even with the likes of SCCM, so we would need SCCM to be able to actually see the Exchange server. So there is a tiny bit of config which we'd need to do. So we'd need a service account which has permissions to make these changes. But when that device is physically marked as non-compliant, config manager in this instance would basically notify the Exchange server that it is no longer compliant, in which case it blocks its access. Now, as you can see here, the application access them. So Outlook and other applications that use modern authentication. So Outlook for iOS and Outlook for Android are modern authentication applications. So we can say all platforms, or we can say iOS, Android, and Windows. Now you'll notice here we have Windows because we can also use conditional access with desktop machines. So block non-compliant devices on same platform as Outlook. So what this essentially means is any devices that have Outlook on and are not compliant, they also cannot access Outlook Web Access. So it's a nice way of making sure that all routes into accessing email are blocked while that device is not compliant. Making our way down, Exchange Active Sync that uses basic authentication. So we can allow access, or we can say block non-compliant devices on same platforms supported by Microsoft Intune. So I can appreciate the wording on this is not very good, but essentially what that means is if a device tries to access Exchange and it is not compliant, it does not get email. Now, I'm not going to click cancel, otherwise I'm going to make a change to our estate, but if I do tick that, you see we now also have this option, which is block all other devices on platforms. So this is very much, we will block it anyway. So we will block the native client, which is we tend to see a lot of customers looking to do because the level of control around the native application isn't there yet. So who's affected by this? So it's not just everyone. We can select types of groups that we want to be affected. So Intune users, for example, we've set up an AD group. So all of our Intune users there, if they try to enroll without the actual Intune client, so all that basically is, it's just a group of users. Once that identity tries to hit the mail server and it tries to pull down email, conditional access knows, well, this user is subject to conditional access, so it blocks its access. And then what we can do is we can choose to exempt security groups as well. So you have that level of control. It's not it's always on approach for everyone. We can say, for specific users, we do want that left on. It's similar for the likes of SharePoint. iOS, Android, MAM are exempted groups as well. So that's conditional access. Apologies, I couldn't demonstrate that today, but what we will do, let's show you MAM without enrollment. So I'm just going to pull up my device here so you can see. Where are you? There we go. So what I'm going to do now, obviously earlier in the demo you saw me enroll my device. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to unenroll this now. So let's take the mobile device management solution off. So all of this will go. So as you can see, the first thing that you will see, so bearing in mind with MAM with enrollment, it will apply security policies around the likes of SharePoint, Word. So if I just open Word now, and I'm hoping it's going to pop in. Please don't ruin my demonstration. Come on. Actually, no, I know what that is. That's not a problem. That's fine. So I'm just going to remove all of these accounts for you. Bear with me 2 seconds. So for those that are probably thinking, well, hold on a sec, why did it not pop up and remove? And because natively what it will actually do, when a user does unenroll their device, you will see this. You will basically see that it will wipe the applications that are on the device full of the corporate data. The reason for this is because I'm actually set up with MAM without enrollment, which is why you didn't see that experience. So just going to wait for this to clear itself and make sure that we don't have any leftover information. So picture this being a brand new phone. So hasn't been enrolled in an MDM solution. Come on. I think I'm subject to the phone's mercy at the moment. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sign in. Now, just to prove a point, if I go to in here, what you'll see in a moment, it will say that device is unenrolled. So I do not have any mobile device management solution active on my device at the moment. So let's go into settings. There is no management profile either. So this is a completely unenrolled phone. Now, if I jump back into the likes of Word then, let's go ahead and I'll start typing my email address. Obviously I have 2 accounts, so it's a work or school. So I'm just going to move this out of the way. Bear with me 2 seconds. And there we go. So I've now connected to Word. Now, I'm not enrolled. What we should expect to see in a moment, providing I haven't left anything else on here, is it should pop up to say, there we go, your organization is now protecting its data in this application. You need to restart the app to continue. Now, bearing in mind at this point, I don't actually have any mobile device management solution on here. So, this is taking a completely different approach for managing users' devices. It's not about yeah, will control your whole device. This will just protect our data. So I have to restart the device. So if I click OK and I open it up. Okay, so the MAM functionality is now enabled. Now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to do this for a couple of the devices, so a couple of the applications. So let's do, what else do I have that I can do that's a MAM enabled app? Let's do Skype for Business. I'll do a lovely Apple approach of live demo. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, perfect. So, as we clearly said, there is no management that's applied to this. Now, what I'm going to do as well, I'm just going to find the Outlook application, which it appears it hasn't synced since. So, I'm going to download it actually. So bear with me 2 seconds. Obviously, bearing in mind that when I unenroll, I don't have the pushing of applications, so that's why that hasn't. I'd removed it, but the device actually hadn't checked in, so it hadn't re-pulled that back down. So I'm just going to re-add that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 mail accounts. So I'm going to add a personal account and my PowerON Platforms account. Perfect. Okay. So because I am already logged in to Word, it's clever enough to know, okay, here's your information, so we can simply just add it. So the Outlook applications or the MAM enabled applications are very are quite nicely, they work quite nice with each other. So if you log into one, it's quite nice that it will just find the details for them. So what we should see then when this finishes making its way through. As you can see straight away, your organization is now protecting its data in this application. So let's click OK and let's restart that. So you may see that this has just popped back up. I'll explain in a moment why that's doing that. But let's just type my credentials in and my PIN. Okay. Come on. Sorry, the application doesn't seem to be playing ball just at the moment. Come on. Let's add it manually. And if it's not going to, right, Stuart.McLaughlan at PowerON.com. Typical. Okay, fingers crossed. It should pull down some mail. I don't know why that's not done that yet. Hold on. Let's try that again. So I appreciate that I may have just slightly gone over, but just bear with me. We should be wrapping up shortly. I have no idea why it's not pulling my data down. Hold on. There we go. Perfect. So just going to quickly add, as quick as I can, another mailbox. So let's add another mailbox then. I don't want you guys emailing me, so I'm just going to hide this away again. I'm sure you're a lovely bunch. Okay. Well, I've revealed my mailbox anyway. So, okay. So we have two mailboxes here. I have no idea what's going to come up in these mailboxes, so just bear with me. It's just my personal mailbox. So, for example, then I have an out of office here. So bearing in mind this is my corporate identity. So what we have done, I'll show you the policy in just a second, but what we've actually got here. Yeah, come on, let me select you. So I just appreciate that I don't quite think it's finished loading. Come on, let me select you. Okay, let's grab the email from Ryan. So you can see here. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to copy a piece of text from a corporate email. So if I click copy, and then if I then open up my personal mailbox and try to type that information in, oops, my organisation data cannot be pasted here. So we can control how the applicator or how the identities can talk to each other. You know, how these identities can talk, but you can see here, this is the same application, but they can't talk to each other. We can control what level that they actually physically can. Now, you still have control over the user's mailbox. So say, for example, I was to go, okay, cool. So we've said in this instance that we want to allow data to be pasted from the personal to the corporate, but not the other way around. So I should be able to go start a new mail, and we should see that text come back up. There we go. So we can get information in to the application. Information out. No. We can take information from the personal and put it into the corporate, but not from the corporate to the personal. So that's I guess that's just a brief overview of man without enrollment. As you can see here, the device is completely not enrolled, but you know, we're managing the identity within that actual application. Now, just before we wrap up, I want to show you some of the features that we actually, or some of the policies which we can choose. So I said earlier about how the the corporate cannot paste information into the personal, but the personal can talk to the corporate. So we've actually got here within portal.azure, we have an app policy. So we have our list of applications that will support this. So if I jump into demo policy here, man policy rather, we can see the applications that have been accessed and the ones which are subject in this policy. So if we click policy settings, we can say that data within that, or corporate data, so bearing in mind here, we were talking about iCloud earlier, your personal data in the Outlook app can be backed up, but your corporate data can't. So allow app to transfer data to other apps, so other MAM enabled apps. So every, for the likes of Skype for Business, I should be able to take my corporate data, paste it into Skype for Business, but something like Adobe, I'll receive that message that basically says that my data can't be put here. Preventing save as on my corporate data, and restrict, cut, copy and paste with other apps. So you can see here I can paste in, but I cannot take it out. Encrypt app data when device is locked. Disable contact sync. Disable printing. Now you may remember earlier I had a pop-up that was asking me again for my corporate password. So what we can do here is we can say require PIN for access after these period of times here. So, for example, after 30 minutes, if the device is no longer being accessed, then it will check for these credentials. So we can require a PIN, which the user will make up, or we can just get them to type in their corporate credentials again. So there's just, I guess, just a brief overview of MAM. Now there was loads that I wish I could have shown you, but unfortunately, as I say, we have run out of time today. So just to wrap up then, there is, for you guys that are looking at the likes of the EMS suite and Intune in particular, there is a blog, which is the blogs.technet.microsoft.com/enterprise mobility. So everything that Microsoft are coming out with, any sort of tech previews or any upcoming ideas that they have will be on that. So if you are looking to get involved with EMS, it's definitely a good blog to follow. And then the user voice. So specifically around the Intune side, if there is a feature which you think that a lot of other customers would be interested in, but it hasn't yet to be implemented, you can go to this website and you can suggest features to be implemented. Is there any questions? Okay. Perfect. Okay, well, if that's it then, I guess I'll hand over to Catherine, but thank you very much for joining me today. If you do have any questions, please do let me know. You can get me on stuart.mclaughlin@poweronplatforms.com. Be nice to hear some of your feedback, so if you have got some feedback, please do let me know, but I'll pass you over to Catherine now. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, everyone. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. You can easily find us through the website or just email us at info@poweronplatforms.com. But thanks very much and have a lovely Easter weekend. Thanks. Bye.